Hi, welcome to In a Pickle Knitting. My name is Donna. I'm coming to you from the northern part of Virginia in Manassas in the U.S. Today is Friday, March 16th, 2018, and this is a podcast about knitting and some sewing and other fiber-related activities. So today, I would like to welcome you if you are brand new to the podcast, and I hope that you find something here that would interest you. And those of you who've come back, thank you so much. I hope that you are interested in as well in what I have today to show. And today that will be one finished object, several works in progress, our children's fiber-related literature book, a tool I'd like to share. We have some giveaways. There'll be a cupcake at the end, and also an additional book, which I will put at the very, very end. This is not fiber related, but it is a children's literature book for St. Patrick's Day. It's not actually specifically St. Patrick's Day, and I actually have a few more, so I'll decide at the end if I still have voice enough to talk about a couple more, but I'd like to share those. But I realize that's not something everyone is interested in, and so I'll put that at the very, very end. And if I get ambitious enough, I will have some timestamps over here or down below in the down bar. And last time I talked about not putting show notes, but I ended up putting a lot of links right below the podcast, that little, on my devices, it's all a little gray upside down triangle that you click on. If you go there, there will be links as well. So to start off, I would like to thank those people who came to the Etsy shop update and purchased items. I appreciate you so much, trusting that what I send you will be something that you enjoy, and I hope that everyone has received their packages and that you were pleased. So, finished objects. It's been a long time since I've been here, and that's been a number of things, woe is me tales that you probably don't want to hear, but I will summarize by saying when it was time to do a podcast, my grandson got sick. He was sick for a week and did not go to school, so his 3 preschool days are when I normally podcast now, and so I could not podcast then, and in fact was off 2 different days to pediatrician, and so I was unable to do any podcasting then. And then of course I got it, and so I have been sick for a week. If my voice sounds a little different, that's what it is, and I'm feeling well enough today. I hope my voice lasts and I'm not coughing or anything else during the podcast. I will try my best to edit things out if that happens. And so I also, today is Friday, and my grandson's other grandparents are in town to visit, so he is with them today, and that gave me a day that I don't normally have to podcast to give it a try. So I'm going to break it up into small segments so that I can give my voice a little bit of a rest, and I don't want to start any mad coughing fits. And we will get started then with that poor little finished object. The finished object I have is one that I showed you on the last podcast as a work in progress, and they are my rainbow socks. And this is the tallest pair of socks I have ever knit. There, that's giving you an idea. The yarn that I used is from Wandering Wool. It is her North Country sock base, a 75-25 merino nylon blend, 463 yards and 100 grams, and the colorway is, of course, called Rainbow. And what I did on these, if you had seen the other podcast when I started them, I know that I showed it was 2 separate pre-wound balls. That's how, this is a Wandering Wool up here. That's a full skein. What I had was the same thing with the reverse color. The red was on the inside and the blue on the outside, or purple on the outside. And but it was 2 separate cakes intended for socks that you can make a matching pair of socks. But what I had to do was cut the yarn. because otherwise these socks would have been up to my knees, and I wanted to use all the colors. So when I realized that about here, I thought, oh, duh. To get all 6 colors that she has here, you're using 50 grams. Sorry, I got interrupted there with an alarm on my iPad that I forgot about. So you had to use all 50 grams in order to use all the colors, and I never made a pair of socks, a single sock with 50 grams. So I started cutting the wool, and so I ended up with, excess, but I got all the colors in. And I'm going to put it up here closer. I'll just do one there. So you can see, I hope you can see that, the way she has it faded. And I was able to still get that in the sock, and I really like the way that this yarn faded in, and I hope that you can see those, you can see this one pretty clearly. But I'm very pleased with these socks, and perfect day to show them, rainbows, and we're tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day, so maybe I'll wear these tomorrow if it's cold out. So this is my only finished object, this pair of socks, with whatever. I'm very pleased. On my podcast, I never show any drinking or tea or anything, but I am having to have something to drink today because of this cold I'm trying to fight off. So I will share that I have this lovely mug that I got last year at Maryland Sheep and Wool, and this is from, I'll have to put the name down here. I know it was a name, and I think it starts with a T, and it was the Lion something or other. So I'll put the name down here, but I really like this mug. It's nice and big, and I'm having to take sips of some raspberry zinger tea to keep my throat here going. So let's move on to works in progress. I have one major work in progress, and I'm glad that I'm getting pretty near the end. So so that it looks like for this long period of time I've at least done some knitting, and that is the 3rd times a charm shawl that I'm working on. And this is from Elizzy Art, E-L-I-Z-Y Art, and this is a pattern that's available on Ravelry. And it is a 2-color shawl, I'm sorry. It's very simple pattern. And I forgot to say the last time, I had just started the shawl the last time I podcast, and I don't want to show the pattern too much. But I did want to mention how she's doing something that I find very helpful in a pattern. And so I'll keep it back here, but along here she has each row, she has a stitch count and tells you what round you're on, and a place for you to check off that you finished that. So I'm showing the part I haven't done yet because mine is very well marked. I do like a printed pattern, and I do lots of writing on it. For instance, here she tells you when you're at half of your yarn, so I have to write really big, weigh the yarn, because I just will move right past that and totally forget to do it. So I really appreciate the way that she wrote her pattern, and let me show you the yarn I'm using. I'm using Vivid yarn in 2 colorways. This is Royal Purple, and this is Stardust. And let me show you her tag. Vivid Yarn Studio. This is in Canada. It's a 75-25 merino nylon blend with 463 yards in each 100 grams, and was dyed in Canada. I had seen it on Instagram, I think, and she had the 2 skeins next to each other, and I just loved it. So I ordered it and wanted to do a 2-color shawl, and just had never found the shawl I wanted to use it on, because it was one of those sets of skeins that I just was sort of hoarding. It's that, well, no, that isn't going to be, I'm not going to use it on that because I just liked it so much. So let me show you where I am. It's, of course, hard to show now. If I turn it the other way, it is a long crescent shawl, and of course you can see that there's variety of different patterns, stitch patterns in it, and that really keeps your interest because you just do so much of this, and then you stop and do this for a while, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you start over again. So I'm really liking the way it's working up, and I think I have to finish this section, and then I think I have 2 more. But what I hope, and it probably won't work out this way, as you can see I have more of this left, and you are supposed to have more of the contrast left. I would like to have maybe an extra, maybe I-cord bind off or something, or a couple of rows of garter stitch and then an I-cord bind off. I probably won't have enough, but I'd like to do that with this because I think that might look nice at the end. If not, I may have enough of this and we'll do that instead. But I would like to just go ahead and use a lot of the yarn. But very happy with it. Oh, wrong side. And it's been a lot of fun. And very easy knitting. There's nothing difficult about it at all. So over in the Ravelry group, we have not a specific knit along or make along for this particular shawl, but as a 2-color project, this shawl fits in. And if you chose to do it, then you can enter your entry twice if you choose to do this 2-color project. But any 2-color project that you're working on, we do now have a finished object thread over there, and there is a chatter thread going on and lots of different projects being worked on. So if you're doing anything with 2 colors, why don't you go have a look at the chatter thread and see some of the things going on and consider entering your 2-color project. We are going to have a drawing from both the finished object and the chatter thread, so you don't even have to finish your project. And I believe April 13th is our ending date on that, but again, you don't have to be done. If you are, you have a chance to enter in both of the threads. So, but the 3rd time's a charm shawl is a double entry in the finished object thread to increase your odds of winning. So that's my major work in progress. But I got myself in a pickle. And the back of my mind knew I was doing it, knew I probably shouldn't do it, did it anyway, and I don't know, all in the name of science, let's say. And so I'll give a tiny backstory here. Hopefully it'll be tiny. I have always wanted to know methods of knitting socks, how my gauge differs. And you don't always know because it's like, well, you know, this time I decided to use a different needle or a different method, and it doesn't compare with that one, and then the yarns are different. And I thought to myself, what I need to do is just do it like a science experiment where you control the variables. You have one variable, and the one variable would be, in this case, the style of or method of knitting. So I would want to have all the same yarn. Well, I want to knit all my striping yarn this year, not all of it, but I want to knit a lot of my self-striping yarn. And I happen to have quite a few by the same person on the same base. So that controls that. That's not a variable, then that's the same. It's a constant. And the needles, of course, would be different, but I thought I'd control the manufacturer. And so therefore the materials would be very similar. So I decided to go with my Chai-Gu, which are my favorite, and then do the different ways, at least that I knew of, to knit socks. Double pointed needles, magic loop 2 at a time, magic loop, using 2 circulars, which is a method I never tried before, and the 9-inch circular. And so that's what I did. I set up an experiment, and the problem is now I have 5 pair of socks on the needles, and that's making me really anxious that I started all of these things and I can't get close to being finished with them. So that's my pickle that I put myself in. But let me talk about, I wanted to know how it affected my gauge. And the reason I wanted to know that was once, a long time ago when I was first knitting socks, I was knitting a pair of socks using Addie, let me see, I set the envelope down here. Let me pause. Sorry. So I had started the pair of socks on my Addie sock rockets. Addie Turbo rockets is what they are. And if you'll notice at the top there, it's a US size 1. So these are the needles I was using, and I love these needles with the exception that, and I doubt I can show it to you in here, but they tend to tarnish from the way I knit and the needle against my hand. They'll get a little tarnish there, but I love the tips. They're not very sharp, but for just plain vanilla sock knitting, they're perfectly fine for me. And they're very slick, so they really, I find you do knit faster. And that was something else I wanted to know, is which method am I fastest at and get the best gauge. So anyway, started a pair of socks on these. Was taking a trip and I thought, ooh, these were sort of expensive, and what if they take them away from me? So I was at the point of putting in an afterthought heel, so I actually cut in the heel and I got some size 1 wooden DPNs because I thought, okay, if they take them, they do, but probably they won't because they're wooden. So I knit my heels and on the airplane and found that my gauge was tighter. And I thought, oh, well, maybe when I'm knitting on DPNs or maybe when I'm knitting on wooden needles, I knit tighter. And I've actually thought that all along. But I just wanted to test and see if that was the case. I have since found out, since starting this little project, that these Addy size 1s, I'm thinking, these don't feel like 1s. They say they're 1s, but they also say they're 2.5 millimeters, which is a 1.5. And I have this little needle gauge here from Chai Gu, and a 1.5 size needle is a 2.5. So I'm thinking I'm on a 1 and I'm on a 1.5. So of course my gauge was different. I was using a size 1 for the heels. Okay, duh. But really, you know, I never looked at the millimeters because I'm in the US and I just always had gone by numbers anyway. I was used to doing that with other things. Size 1, it's size 1. It's not. And so to me that's a mistake on here, but whatever. So set up my experiment. I got out 5 different colors of my Cozy Knitter yarn. Okay, this is the first one. So they're all on the Bliss base and they're all from the Cozy Knitter. Of course the colors are different, but that doesn't make an impact on my gauge nor how quickly I knit them. And I chose to do these, as I said, I'm doing all Chai Gu needles, thinking, well, then the material's going to be the same that the needle's made of, so I won't be using different materials. Here's what they're looking like. Here's what the cake looks like. Okay, on my screen, this pink is screaming at me, and it is a bright highlighter pink, but it's not that bright. Actually, all the colors are showing up brighter than they're probably more like that. Probably the sun coming in on them. They're more like that. So if you look at my gauge, and don't judge me, I don't have great gauge there. Okay. But that's what my stitches usually look like before I block them. Okay. Size 1. I'm doing size 1 for all of my samples. So that was DPNs, and on DPNs what I did was 4 rounds. I timed myself and I got to the same sort of part in the sock. I knit down through usually one repeat of the color, or at least, you know, 3 or 4 inches, and then put a little marker and did 4 rounds, and with the exception of the magic loop, and then I did 2 rounds on each sock, so that would be 4 rounds. And timed how long it took me and then measured my gauge. So on the DPNs, my gauge was 8 stitches per inch and 11 rows per inch. And it took me 7 minutes and 49 seconds to do the 4 rounds. So if you round up to 8 minutes, then about 2 minutes a round. So you can tell I'm not a super speedy knitter. So that was DPNs. Now, my usual method, and I expected to be probably the fastest and look the best because I liked it the best, is also, of course, on Cozy Knitter Bliss base, but it's colorway Princess Party. And all of these yarns are, on the Bliss base is an 80-20 merino, a superwash merino nylon blend, and it's 380 meters or 420 yards in 100 grams, or 4 ounces, okay, which is 115 grams, excuse me. So that's in 4 ounces, you get 420 yards, so in 115 grams. So it's actually a fairly plump sock yarn, which is one thing I like about it. So this is what it looks like caked up. So excuse my messy show there, but that's, I pulled a lot out. And here's what they look like. If you can see, it's a speckle, white, pink, white speckle. So there's the pattern. So at 2 at a time, magic loop on a size 1 chai gu. This is the mini twist. My gauge is 8 stitches per inch, 11 rows per inch. So the exact same thing as I got on the DPNs. And it took me 7 minutes and 57 seconds. So a little longer than the DPNs, which isn't surprising. There's a lot of fiddliness with both, I think, but with the magic loop doing 2, even more fiddliness. I was looking at the wrong number there for the magic loop 2 at a time. It was actually took me 8 minutes and 15 seconds to do that. I was looking at magic loop, not 2 at a time. So the time, that was my longest time of any method, and I didn't expect that because it's the one that I use most often. I thought I'd be faster at it, but it in fact takes me the longest. The advantage for me is that when I do socks 1 at a time, I might take notes, I might forget to take notes, I might lose those notes, and then when I go to do the second one, I'm always afraid I'm not going to get them to be an exact match. And when I do 2 at a time, whatever I do to one, I do to the other. So for me, it helps just with I guess as a knitting personality that I'm not necessarily good at remembering to write everything down and do everything exactly the same way every time. I do change a lot of stuff up and try different things and then forget. So that's one advantage to that method for me. That brings me then to using 2 circular needles, and this was the method that was absolutely the newest to me. I had never done it before, so I watched some videos and made sure that I had 2 needles that I could use. They suggested using 2 different colored cords that would help. I can see the advantage of that, but I don't like to mix up brands, and particularly in this case, as I was doing an experiment, I didn't. So that threw me off a few times because what happened to me is that I'm used to doing magic loop. And so I found myself twice, I actually did it magic loop, and then I ended up with a needle that doesn't have anything on it and had to set things up again. I think if you'd only done this way, you would never do that, or if you hadn't done magic loop before. But this colorway is called Be My Belle. It's again Cozy Knitter, Be My Belle, and here is the cake. It has yellow and pale blue and a light gray and some white. And I find I do like this method. I ended up with the same gauge, 8 stitches per inch, 11 rows per inch, and this is actually my second to the fastest method. It took 7 minutes and 17 seconds. I did get a little bit farther before I knit quite a bit and then timed myself because it was the newest to me. I never did just sit down and start timing. I always knit a few rows just to, get yourself in the groove. My first rows aren't always my best. But this one I did a little bit longer just because it is so new. Okay, and then have I done? No, not the final method. The next method is Magic Loop. And that is this colorway, which I forgot to bring the ball band up, but this is called Kiss the Girl. And same base. I'm using a 24-inch chai gu, but it's not the mini twist. Was going to use mini twist, but when I went to put that size needle on the cable, the screw broke inside the cable. So now I'm out of cable and I'm out of needle and I have to buy some more. So I did have this and decided to use it, and it's not quite as long as I would like. It makes it a little bit harder for me to knit this way, but normally Magic Loop is not as, I don't struggle with it at all compared to this a little bit. But I got the same exact gauge again, 8 stitches, 11 rows per inch, and using magic loop was 7 minutes 15 seconds. The final method I have done before is a 9-inch circular, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to abandon this method because it is the fastest, 6 minutes 51 seconds, but I lost a stitch and a row per inch. I'm 7 stitches per inch, 10 rows per inch, and I don't like the look of the knitting. It's and I'm not even showing you probably all. There's lots and lots of wonky stitches. I can't hold it as well. I can get going, but my hands do cramp with this, so I wasn't happy at all. This is actually a size 0 needle now. I did, after doing the experiment, get a size 0 and to see if I could get the same gauge, but I am getting a better gauge, a tighter gauge. I'm not getting exactly the 8 stitches per inch, but the stitches are just too wonky. And that colorway, sorry, is Bunny Foo Foo, an Easter colorway, and you can see lots of pretty color stripes. I like that one a lot. So that was my little in a pickle thing. Got me with lots of socks going, and not quite sure how I feel about that. I'm not good at having too many things ongoing, not feeling like they're moving along. And one can become my on-the-go knitting, which usually takes me a really long time to get done, but I am still working on that sock blank sock. So I like the sock blank for on-the-go because you don't have a ball of yarn to roll away. It's just all coming off the blank. So I might, since I'm trying to use up some sock blanks too, I might keep that as my on-the-go knitting. So that was my little science experiment with different ways to knit socks. And now it's time for our children's literature that has a fiber-related content. And this one is not knitting or crocheting or spinning or weaving. It is a new one. And Ellie, if you're watching from Craft House Magic, it might be one that you enjoy. This is a book from one of my favorite children's authors, and that's Patricia Polacco. She writes so many stories from her own life. And if you've read The Keeping Quilt, and I can't think of the other one, but they were stories about her mother's families, and The Keeping Quilt would be, one book that I might do sometime. But her dad's family immigrated to America from Ireland, and so she's written a book about that immigration and her family, and it's called Fiona's Lace. Her Irish ancestors were lace makers, and Fiona is actually Patricia Polacco's great-great-great-grandmother, and she was a wonderful lace maker, as had been her mother, but her mother became unable to knit lace, or not knit lace, create lace, because her hands, I believe, had become arthritic. So this tells the story. It's a book that I would use as an educator if I was teaching any kind of an immigration unit, because it does talk about immigrating to America and the difficult time that this family coming from Ireland had. In their village, a mill was being closed, and so this was their survival, their livelihood, and they decided to immigrate to America. They came to Chicago, where they were indentured servants, and their living conditions were very poor. They survived the Great Chicago Fire, and Fiona's Lace plays a role in the family being able to find one another again after the fire. Fiona and her younger sister are separated from her parents during this time, and they use the lace to find one another. And there's a connection in this story to a favorite family tale that the girls would ask their dad to tell about how he and his mother came to be together. So if you enjoy hearing stories about immigration or anything from Patricia Polacco, or about a family's survival, I think that you will enjoy Patricia Polacco's story, Fiona's Lace. And now we have some giveaways. First of all, it's time to draw for our sock along finished object thread. And if you are a sock knitter, please consider adding your socks to the sock along. It runs all the time, and anything you finish, you can put in. Doesn't matter when you started it, just add it. When you finish to the finished object thread, there's also a chatter thread going on, and I love for you to share your socks over there too and tell about them so people can comment and encourage you with your socks. You can do it while in progress, but also those finished socks, because a lot of times people do have questions and we don't want commenting over in the finished object thread. So please, I would appreciate you putting them in both places. Sometimes I have a question about your socks too, maybe the pattern name or the yarn that you're using. So please consider putting them in both places. But I pulled for the winners from the finished object thread. And today we started with number 262, because the last time I drew I went through 261, so we get everybody included. And today the last entry was 384 when I did this morning. And so if 385 is already there, that's fine. You'll be eligible next time. And number 273 won, and that is Miss Bossy Pants. And what you've won is this skein of sock yarn, enough to make a pair of socks. It's from Lang Javel, and these colors I think just have numbers, but even if there's a name, I can't read it. It's too small a print for me, and so it's a charcoal gray with some pops of a teal, a lime green, and a blue. And I also want to show you, this is the brand of yarn that puts a nylon reinforcing thread that's in a matching colorway right up in here. So if you want to give that a try to either to do double with your heels or your toes or wherever you wear your socks out, this is coming to you. So Miss Bossy Pants, if you would send me a private message on Ravelry telling me your real name and your mailing address, I will get this mailed out to you. And our second giveaway was our 2,500 subscriber giveaway, which was done on YouTube. So this was done from the comments that you type in below the video here. And I went to the YouTube random comment generator, and it said there were 98 unique commenters. So what I like about that is it doesn't matter if somebody comments back to you, or I can comment to you, and it doesn't count me. And our winner is Sharon Littler. And she said that she doesn't get snow days very often, but when she does, she likes to sit by a window and watch it fall while she's knitting, which just sounds perfect. So Sharon, if you could either private message me on Ravelry, or if you're not on Ravelry and can't do that, you can go to my Gmail account. I have inapicklenitting@gmail.com, and send me a message there telling me that you're the prize winner. I will send out your snowman bag to you. I have your name, but I need your mailing address to mail you this lovely bag from Ellie at Craft House Magic, and a snowman bag with a snowman progress keeper. If you will send me your information, I will get this mailed off to you. Now I want to say, the back of my mind has something niggling that I'm either said it was going to be something along with this item, or if I did, it's not coming to me. I checked my notes and didn't find it. I'm going to go back and rewatch the last podcast to make sure I'm not leaving something out, or if somebody knows what it was, let me know. I'll take care of it if I'm forgetting something, but just can't do it right now. The next thing I wanted to do was share something that's not a recently finished object. It's something that I knit last year in March for a pair of socks. And they are my Shamrock Socks. And I thought today might be, of course I wasn't podcasting back when I created these. And so I wanted to share them because there is a lace pattern here that makes a little shamrock, and I really enjoyed making these socks, and I'm going to wear them tomorrow. They were knit on MJ Yarns Sophista Sock. I think that's how you say it. It's a 75% merino, 15% nylon, 10% tencel, which I find gives a nice feel to the yarn. It's in a colorway Forest Elf, and it was a fairly tonal Green, you can probably tell best in the stockinette there. And I really enjoyed knitting these socks out of that yarn. The name of the pattern is Shamrock Socks, and let me pull up I think it's Lisa K, but I want to be sure. Shamrock Sock is the name of the pattern. It's by Lisa K. I used a size 1, which is what I usually use on my socks, 2.25 millimeter, and I used about, doesn't say about how much yarn I used, but nowhere near the full skein. I know I had quite a bit left over, and I did cast on 60 stitches to create these socks. So that was just something for St. Patrick's Day to throw in there. Next, I want to talk about our cupcake, which we don't have very often, but I did want to include one today. And this is, I'll show a picture here of the cupcake. This is a chocolate flavored cupcake, but it is again made with Guinness beer, so it has Guinness added to the cupcake base, and then the frosting is a Bailey's frosting. So I will put the recipe for that cupcake down below, I believe. I will just probably type it up and copy paste it into that area below the video here. So if you're interested in making a flavorful cupcake, this is a very moist cupcake. It's I've made this same recipe, I think 4 different years in a row by request because it was favored flavor. So that is our cupcake for today. And on that food, cooking, sweetness kind of note, I wanted to mention that I had watched the Bakery Bears podcast last weekend, and they have started I think it's a pudding club, and Kay demonstrated making a steamed pudding. And I am going to I'm going to try to participate with that event that they're doing. I couldn't make it this week because I just have been so unwell. And also went through my cupboard, and I had golden syrup. I had used it for something before, but there's only about this much left in the bottom of the jar, and it has started to sugar. So I needed another jar, and the store where I bought it doesn't seem to have it anymore. And I've looked 2 other places, so I'm hoping I can find golden syrup someplace locally. If not, I can probably order it on Amazon. I have ordered a few ingredients from Amazon's pantry, and that's worked out okay. Hopefully I can get it locally, but I'm going to try to participate with that, and anybody wants to do it along with them and me, I'd love to hear your cooking results. So that's enough about food for this morning. So I want to share what I'm grateful for today. And today's gratitude is going out mainly to my husband, who is the best craft enabler. He is not a crafty person, doesn't do things with his hands, which is surprising as his father was an excellent carpenter and builder of things. But he doesn't. But he thoroughly encourages me to do all of the different crafting or cooking or my need to make things. He indulges all of that. And recently, when making my tutorial for the 3-zipper bag, I had mentioned how old my machine was. And then I've been working on my grandson's quilt and said, I really would like to quilt it myself, do the quilting myself on the machine, because I think I could do it. Not in a fancy way, but maybe just stitching in the ditch. But the problem I have is my machine is, I can't get a walking foot for it. And I have bought 2 off-brand pieces that were supposed to work for it, and neither one does. And the company doesn't make one. So I really can't do the quilting, and bought me a new sewing machine. So I now have a walking foot and a new machine, which I'm trying to learn. But I'm grateful for my husband in all of the ways that he indulges my need to make things. I mentioned that I'd like to talk about a tool today, and I always appreciate those segments on other podcasts that I watch. This is a tool that I've used and don't use it a lot, but I really enjoy using it and find that it does a great job. But I haven't seen another podcast show it, and that's just purely it's not one, if it's been shown, it's just not a podcast I watch or saw an episode where they did review this item. But this is called an embellish knit. And I got mine from Amazon. It is, I paid about $19 for it. And what it creates is an I-cord cord itself, that you, not an edging, but just the actual I-cord. And I have used it a lot when I make mittens for my grandson, because I want to, or hats with the ties, want to connect the mittens with a long cord. And it's so fast that I feel like, it's something that I can do. What you have to do to use it is to have really no tension at all on the yarn that's incoming, other than the tension where it's wound up through this little hole and over this guide. And there's a special way of getting it started that's different than once it gets going. And you have to have weight. This weight has to be pulling it down. And then all you do is turn. Well, I'm getting twisted here with the incoming yarn, but all you do is turn. And of course, I turned the wrong way, sorry. But you just turn and you end up with an I-cord. And at the end, you've got your 4 little loops there. You just cut your thread and run them through this. I have actually taken these live stitches and then started knitting it onto my knitting from there on a little hat once. And that worked really well. So this embellish knit is a handy little tool if you want to make any cords, I-cords like that to put on mittens or hats, or they had lots of other ideas too, that you just make a lot of this and then you can make little designs out of it and sew them onto your knitting. So lots of other things you could do with it as well. That's embellish knit, and I'll put a link to the Amazon source that I used down below. So here we are at the end of the podcast, and I will, right after this part, talk about a book today. But if you stuck with me this long, thanks so much. I hope there was something today that was interesting to you, and I hope that next time I have a little bit more knitting to share. When I was sick this week, there were 4 days I did not walk in my sewing room, and I did not... I didn't pick up a knitting needle. So that's one reason. And then with my grandson having been sick the week before, it's not been a very productive time period, as well as working on a few other things. So not the most knitting, but I shouldn't apologize for that. It simply is what it is. And so now there is a book that I'd like to share with you for St. Patrick's Day. Although the book is not St. Patrick's Day, it is from a favorite author, and it is a story from Ireland. So it was one that I always shared at this time. And this is Finn McCool and the Great Fish. And it's by Eve Bunting. It's been illustrated by Zachary Pullen. And this is, I love Eve Bunting. I can't pick over, she and Patricia Polacco and a few others are on that list too. I couldn't pick at the top. But this book is such a wonderful story about Finn McCool, a giant in Ireland. And she writes it with an Irish dialect. Eve Bunting is from Ireland. And the illustrations are so perfect with this story. And it is a story about Finn McCool, who is a very helpful giant to all the people, but he's not very bright. And that just bothers him. He's heard that there is a man in the village who can give you wisdom. And this illustration here is one that's very good. Notice these little, this little part of his vest. Red scales, because that comes into the story. And he goes and asks for wisdom, and the old man tells him that he'd been waiting for him to come, and that if he will go to the River Boyne and catch this great red salmon, take it home, cook it, and eat it, that he will get all of the wisdom of the world from this fish. So Finn McCool goes, and the river becomes turbulent when he catches the fish, and as he takes it out, he's looking at this little fish in his hand, and he decides, if this is what it takes to get wisdom, I can't do it. I can't take your life so that I might have wisdom. And the fish starts talking to him and tells him he's been waiting for him. He says, well, if you knew I was coming, why did you take the bait? He said, maybe I wanted you to catch me. But he puts him back. And you'll see here that he had been stuck with the fish hook when he was trying to take it out of the fish's mouth. And takes his thumb out, and it's a shade of pink. So through the blood of the fish, he has attained the wisdom. And interestingly enough, when you go back to the old man's house, he's not there. He wants to thank the old man, but he's not there. You'll notice little details at his house, the fish that's here, but you do see some scales that have fallen off going into the house. So it's just a wonderful telling of this story, and it's one that is fun to share around this Irish and worldwide, or at least in the U.S., very popular holiday, St. Patrick's Day. So Finn McCool and the Great Fish by Eve Bunting.